Thus have I heard. Long ago, in the ancient kingdom of Benares, the Bodhisattva was born as a deer. He lived deep within a great forest where old trees rose like silent towers and their branches spread across the sky. In the rainy season, the earth was dark and fragrant. In the dry season, golden dust rested upon the roots, and every small sound could travel far between the trees. The deer was graceful, swift, and unusually intelligent. He did not survive by speed alone. He survived because he paid attention. He knew where the safest pools could be found. He knew which paths elephants used at night. He knew when leopards were near because certain birds suddenly became quiet. And above all, he knew that danger was often most dangerous when it tried to look harmless. Each morning, before sunrise, the deer would leave the shelter of the deeper forest and search for food. Among his favorite places was a large fruit tree growing near the edge of a clearing. Its branches were heavy with sweet fruit. When the fruit ripened, some fell naturally to the ground, and the deer would often come there in the cool morning hours to eat. He had visited the tree many times. And because he returned often, someone else eventually noticed. A hunter was moving through the forest one afternoon when he saw tracks in the soft earth. He stopped. The prints were fresh. He crouched and touched them with his fingers. "A deer," he whispered. He followed the trail. It led him directly to the fruit tree. Around the roots, he found more tracks. Some were old. Some were new. The hunter smiled. "This animal comes here regularly." He looked up into the branches. Then he began to form a plan. Rather than chase the deer through the forest, he would let the deer come to him. The hunter returned with rope and wood. High among the branches, partly hidden by leaves, he built a small platform where he could sit unseen. From below, it was difficult to notice. The leaves concealed his body. The trunk concealed his shadow. The hunter was pleased. "This will be easy." Before dawn the next morning, he returned carrying a long spear. He climbed the tree quietly and settled on the platform. Then he waited. The forest slowly awakened. Birds began to call. Mist moved between the trunks. A faint silver light entered the clearing. The hunter tightened his grip on the spear. Soon, he heard something. Soft footsteps. A branch moved. Then the deer appeared at the edge of the clearing. The hunter's breathing became shallow. He expected the animal to walk directly toward the tree. But the deer stopped. He stood far away. His ears turned slowly. He looked at the ground. Then at the tree. Something did not feel right. The tree was the same tree. The fruit was the same fruit. The morning seemed peaceful, but the deer had learned that danger often entered familiar places wearing a familiar face. He thought, hunters do not always wait on the ground. Some hide above. If I rush forward simply because I have eaten here safely before, yesterday's safety may become today's trap. So he remained where he was. The hunter waited. The deer did not move. Minutes passed. Still nothing. The hunter became impatient. Why will it not come closer? He looked down. The deer stood beyond the range of his spear. The hunter decided to lure him. He reached for several ripe fruits beside him. One by one, he dropped them from the branches. A fruit fell. Then another. Then another. They landed on the ground, rolling toward the deer. The deer lowered his eyes. He did not move toward them. Instead, his suspicion deepened. Fruit sometimes fell from trees. But not like this. Not several at once. Not all toward him. The deer lifted his head slowly. He studied the branches. Leaves moved. Behind them was a shape that did not belong to the tree. A hand. A shoulder. And then the glint of a spear. The deer understood everything. The hunter believed he was hidden, but his trap had already been seen. The deer could have shouted. He could have run immediately. Instead, he chose something calmer. He stepped back slightly and looked toward the tree as though speaking to it. "My old friend," he said, "you have always given your fruit by letting it fall naturally." The hunter froze. "But today," continued the deer, "your fruit seems to leap through the air and come looking for me." The forest was silent. "That is a very strange habit for a tree." The hunter realized the deer had discovered him. The deer continued, "If you have changed your ways, then perhaps I must change mine." He turned his body toward the deeper forest. "I think I will eat from another tree today." The hunter's patience broke. His plan had failed. Anger replaced caution. He rose suddenly on the platform and hurled the spear with all his strength. The weapon cut through the air. But the deer had already been watching. The instant the hunter moved, the deer sprang aside. The spear struck the earth. The deer stood beyond it, unharmed. For a brief moment, hunter and deer looked at one another. Then the deer spoke, "You failed to kill me today." His voice was steady. "But remember this, actions do not disappear simply because no one punishes them immediately." The hunter said nothing. A person who lives by cruelty creates suffering not only for others, but also for himself. Then the deer turned. With a few swift leaps, he disappeared between the trees. The hunter remained alone above the clearing. His spear lay useless in the earth below. And the forest, which had seemed to him like a place where he could secretly control another creature's fate, became silent once again. The deer ran only until the clearing disappeared behind him. Then he slowed. He did not flee blindly through the forest. Panic could be almost as dangerous as the hunter. A frightened animal might escape one spear only to rush into a ravine, a thorn thicket, or the jaws of another predator. So the deer listened. Behind him, there was no pursuit. The hunter had remained near the fruit tree. Only then did the deer move deeper into the forest. Morning light filtered through the branches in thin golden streams. Drops of dew trembled upon leaves. The forest that had contained death only moments earlier now seemed peaceful again. But the deer knew that appearances could change quickly. A peaceful place could contain danger. A familiar path could become a trap. A sweet fruit could become bait. He stopped beside a stream and drank. As the cold water touched his mouth, he remembered the fruits rolling toward him. There had been nothing frightening about them. They were ripe, fragrant, familiar. Had he looked only at the fruit, he would have walked forward. What had saved him was not greater strength. It was a simple question: why is this happening? The deer lifted his head. That question had created a small space between desire and action. And inside that small space, wisdom had entered. Later that morning, he came upon several younger deer grazing beneath low branches. They noticed him and approached. One asked, "Why have you come from the eastern clearing so early? Do you not usually feed there?" The Bodhisattva answered, "There was food there." "Then why did you leave?" "There was also a hunter." The young deer immediately became frightened. "A hunter? Where? Did he chase you? Were you wounded?" The Bodhisattva shook his head. "No. I saw the trap before I entered it." The youngest deer looked impressed. "How?" The Bodhisattva rested beneath a tree. "I did not know at first." The others gathered around him. "When I reached the clearing, nothing clearly told me that danger was there." The tree looked familiar. The fruit looked familiar. The morning looked peaceful. "Then how did you know?" "I did not know." The young deer looked confused. The Bodhisattva continued, "I became uncertain." And uncertainty was enough? Enough to stop. He looked at them carefully. You do not need to understand every danger before you refuse to rush toward it. The forest became quiet around them. One of the greatest mistakes a creature can make is to believe that it must act immediately simply because something desirable appears. The youngest deer asked, "But if we stop every time we are uncertain, will we not miss many good things?" "Perhaps." The Bodhisattva smiled gently. But wisdom is not fear of everything. It is learning which things deserve a second look. He explained what had happened. He told them about the unusual silence near the tree. about the feeling that something was slightly different, about the fruit falling toward him. When fruit falls naturally, he said, it obeys the tree, the wind, and gravity. It does not repeatedly choose the same direction. One of the young deer laughed. So the hunter gave himself away by trying too hard to make the trap attractive. Exactly. The Bodhisattva looked toward the distant trees. Deception often fails in this way. What do you mean? The deceiver wants you to look at what he is offering. The wise creature also looks at why it is being offered. The deer remembered the sweet fruit. Something pleasant is not necessarily something good. And something familiar is not necessarily something safe. The younger deer listened closely. For them, the forest had always seemed divided into obvious categories. A tiger was dangerous. Fresh grass was safe. A hunter was dangerous. Fruit was safe. But the Bodhisattva was teaching them something more difficult. Danger did not always announce itself with claws. Sometimes it borrowed the appearance of what one already desired. One young deer asked, "Were you angry with the hunter?" The Bodhisattva was silent for a moment. "No." "Why not?" "He wanted to kill you." "Yes." "And he threw a spear." "Yes." "Then why were you not angry?" The Bodhisattva looked into the stream. Because anger would not have made the spear slower. The young deer said nothing. "It might have made me slower." He continued, "When I saw him, I needed to understand where he was, how far away he was, what weapon he held, and which direction was safest. If I had filled my mind with rage, I might have stopped seeing clearly." The youngest deer tilted his head. "So calmness saved you?" "Calmness allowed wisdom to work." The Bodhisattva rose. "Do not misunderstand me. Calmness does not mean standing still while someone harms you." He looked toward the eastern clearing. "When the spear came, I moved. When danger became certain, I left. But I did not need hatred in order to protect myself." This was difficult for the younger deer. They had assumed that fear made one flee and anger made one fight. The Bodhisattva showed them another possibility. One could see danger clearly without surrendering the mind to either. Before leaving, he gave them a warning. "Do not go to the eastern fruit tree for some time." They agreed. Then one asked, "Will the hunter return?" "Perhaps." "Will he build another trap?" "Perhaps." "How can we know?" The Bodhisattva looked into the forest. "We cannot know everything. But we can learn." That afternoon, the hunter climbed down from the tree. His anger had cooled. But disappointment remained. He pulled the spear from the ground and examined the place where the deer had stood. He replayed the morning again and again. The animal should have approached. The bait should have worked. The spear should have struck. Yet nothing had happened as planned. The hunter looked at the tracks leading into the forest. He did not admire the deer's wisdom. Instead, his pride was wounded. "I will catch you another day," he muttered. He believed the contest was between his cleverness and the deer's cleverness. He did not see the deeper contest taking place within himself. Every failed attempt gave him a choice. He could stop. Or he could become more determined to harm. He chose the second. And with that choice, the hunter began constructing a trap more dangerous than the wooden platform in the tree. He began constructing a habit. Each time he allowed greed, anger, and cruelty to guide him, those qualities became easier to follow the next time. A path walked repeatedly becomes clear. So does a path in the mind. The hunter carried his spear home. The deer disappeared into the peaceful forest. One had escaped a trap. The other had begun entering one. And although neither could yet see the full consequences, the deeper teaching of that morning had already begun. The moment before an action may seem small. But sometimes an entire future is hidden inside it. Several days passed. The eastern fruit tree remained standing beside the clearing. Its branches were still heavy with ripe fruit. Morning birds still landed upon them. Wind still moved through the leaves. Nothing about the tree itself had become evil. This was important. The deer did not begin to fear fruit. He did not decide that every tree concealed a hunter. He did not abandon the forest because one place had become dangerous. Wisdom had taught him caution. It had not taught him paranoia. So he continued his ordinary life. He drank from familiar streams. He rested beneath old trees. He searched for food in other parts of the forest. But he did not return to the eastern clearing. One evening, as the sky darkened, the Bodhisattva stood upon a low ridge overlooking the forest. Below him, thousands of leaves moved in the wind like dark waves. The world was vast. There were many places to eat. Many places to drink. Many paths to walk. Why, then, should he risk his life for one particular tree? The answer seemed obvious. Yet he knew that many creatures suffered because they forgot this simple truth. When desire becomes narrow, the world becomes narrow with it. A creature begins to think, I must have this fruit. I must drink from this pool. I must possess this thing. I must win this argument. I must be the one who is praised. And once the mind says must, it becomes easier for danger to lead it. The Bodhisattva remembered the hunter throwing fruit from the branches. The hunter had understood something about desire. He knew that if the deer wanted the fruit strongly enough, the deer might ignore everything strange about the situation. That was how many traps worked. They did not overpower the victim. They invited the victim to cooperate. A trap was strongest when desire pulled from one side and deception waited on the other. The Bodhisattva lowered his head and continued through the forest. Elsewhere, the hunter had not forgotten him. Each day, the memory of failure irritated him. He had hunted many animals before. Some had fled. Some had escaped by chance. But this deer had done something different. It had recognized his plan. Worse, it had spoken to him as though it understood not only the trap but the mind that had created it. The hunter remembered the deer's words, "Your fruit seems to leap through the air and come looking for me." He felt mocked. What had begun as a desire for meat now became something more personal. He wanted to defeat the deer. This change happened quietly. At first, the hunter had wanted something from the animal. Now he wanted victory over the animal. The deer had become a wound to his pride. And pride is often more difficult to satisfy than hunger. Hunger can end with a meal. Pride may continue eating long after the stomach is full. The hunter began asking people near the forest whether they had seen an unusually alert deer. Some woodcutters had. One said, "There is a deer deeper in the forest that never approaches quickly." Another said, "I have seen him stand for a long time before crossing an open path." A third laughed. "Perhaps he is afraid of everything." The hunter knew better. "No," he said. "He is watching everything." That answer should have inspired caution. Instead, it strengthened his determination. He returned to the forest and studied the deer's tracks. He learned where the animal sometimes drank. He learned which paths crossed the hills. He looked for another place to hide. But the Bodhisattva had changed his habits. Not dramatically. That itself was part of his wisdom. He did not behave like a terrified creature fleeing from an enemy. He simply stopped making himself predictable. Some mornings he fed near the river. On others, he moved toward the western hills. Sometimes he rested early. Sometimes he continued walking until noon. He did not follow one path merely because he had followed it yesterday. The younger deer noticed this. One morning, one of them asked, "Why do you keep changing your route?" The Bodhisattva answered, "Because habit is useful until someone else learns to use it against you." The young deer thought about this. Then should we never have habits? We need habits. The Bodhisattva smiled. They save energy. They help us remember where water and shelter are. Then what is wrong with them? Nothing. He continued walking. The danger begins when we stop noticing that a habit has become automatic. They came to a narrow path between two rocks. The Bodhisattva stopped. The younger deer almost walked past him. "Why did you stop?" "Look." "At what?" "The ground." The young deer examined it. At first, he saw nothing. Then he noticed that several dry leaves had been disturbed. There was no trap. Only the footprints of a wild boar that had crossed recently. The Bodhisattva continued. "You see? There was no danger." "No." Then stopping was unnecessary. The Bodhisattva looked at him. "Was it?" The young deer hesitated. "I suppose nothing happened." "Exactly." The Bodhisattva said, "Many wise decisions look unnecessary afterward." The young deer frowned. "What do you mean?" "If you examine a path and find no danger, you may think the examination was wasted. But if you never examine any path, one day you may discover the reason too late." The young deer became quiet. The Bodhisattva continued, "Wisdom often has no dramatic reward. No one applauds you for the trap you did not enter. No one sees the disaster that did not happen. You simply continue walking." They reached a patch of grass. The younger deer began eating. After a while, he asked, "Then how do we know when caution becomes fear?" The Bodhisattva considered the question carefully. "Fear says, because danger exists somewhere, nowhere is safe. Wisdom says, because danger exists, look carefully and choose. Fear closes the world. Wisdom helps you move through it." The young deer lifted his head. "And desire?" The Bodhisattva looked toward a fruit tree in the distance. "Desire says, because something is pleasant, I must move toward it. Wisdom asks, at what cost?" The younger deer chewed slowly. The forest seemed different after hearing these words. Not more dangerous. More detailed. Every path had conditions. Every choice had consequences. Every attractive thing existed inside a larger situation. That afternoon, the hunter found another place where the Bodhisattva had recently passed. He crouched beside the tracks. A narrow trail led toward a grove. He smiled. This time, he decided, he would not use fruit. The deer had already learned that trick. He would create something less obvious. But as he planned, he did not notice how his own mind was becoming trapped by the very principle he hoped to use against the deer. He thought, I must catch this animal. There it was. The same narrowing. The same insistence. The same word, must. There were countless other animals in the forest. There were other ways to obtain food. He could have abandoned the hunt. Nothing forced him to continue. Yet the more the deer escaped, the more necessary its capture seemed. This is one of desire's oldest illusions. The longer we chase something, the more important it begins to feel. We tell ourselves, I have already spent so much time. I have already suffered so much. I cannot stop now. And so yesterday's effort becomes tomorrow's chain. The hunter did not see the chain. He believed he was free because he was the one carrying the spear. The Bodhisattva, meanwhile, rested beneath another tree. Fruit lay on the ground around him. He ate only what he needed. Then he walked away. He did not mourn the fruit tree he had abandoned. He did not think, that tree was mine. He did not think, the hunter stole it from me. The tree had never belonged to him. The fruit had never been promised to him. This understanding gave him a freedom the hunter did not possess. The deer could leave. The hunter could not. One was willing to release what he desired in order to remain free. The other was willing to sacrifice his freedom in order to obtain what he desired. And so, although the hunter carried the weapon and the deer appeared to be the hunted one, a deeper question quietly emerged beneath the ancient forest: which of them was truly trapped? The hunter returned again and again to the forest. Each visit began with a new plan. Each plan began with the same thought: this time, I will succeed. He studied the deer's tracks. He examined places where grass had been eaten. He watched the streams. He learned where fallen fruit gathered after strong winds. He began to understand the forest more carefully than before. But knowledge does not always become wisdom. Sometimes knowledge only gives desire better tools. The hunter became more skilled. Yet he did not become more peaceful. He became more patient with the forest and less patient with himself. Whenever he found signs that the deer had passed nearby, excitement rose in him. Whenever the tracks disappeared, frustration followed. His thoughts became organized around a single animal. At home, his family noticed the change. One evening, a relative asked, "Why are you spending so many days chasing one deer?" The hunter answered, "It is no ordinary deer." "What makes it so special?" "It thinks." The relative laughed. "All deer think enough to run away. This one understands traps. Then hunt another." The hunter's face tightened. "No." "Why not?" "Because I have not defeated this one." There it was again. Not hunger. Not necessity. Defeat. The relative looked at him strangely. "You sound as though the deer insulted you." The hunter said nothing. "In a way, that was exactly how he felt. The deer had not attacked him. It had not stolen from him. It had not entered his home. Yet simply by refusing to become prey, it had wounded his pride. This is how the mind sometimes creates enemies. Another being does not need to harm us. It only needs to refuse the role we assign to it. A person refuses to obey. A rival refuses to lose. A child refuses to become what was expected. A stranger refuses to be intimidated. And suddenly resistance feels like injury. The hunter sharpened his spear. "I will go again tomorrow." His relative shrugged. "Then perhaps you should ask yourself whether you are hunting the deer or your own wounded pride." The hunter frowned. He did not like the question. Questions are uncomfortable when they point toward something we are trying not to see. So he ignored it. Before dawn, he entered the forest again. This time, he carried no fruit. He intended to hide beside a narrow passage between two rocky slopes. The deer, he believed, might eventually cross there. He chose a place where shadows remained even after sunrise. Then he waited. Hours passed. Birds moved overhead. A monkey appeared in the branches, looked at him, and vanished. Still the deer did not come. The hunter's legs became numb. His back hurt. Flies gathered around his face. Yet he remained. By midday, he heard movement. His grip tightened. Something approached the passage. A young deer stepped into view. Not the one he wanted. The hunter could easily have killed it. He raised the spear. Then stopped. For a brief moment, he saw the absurdity of what had happened to him. Here was food. Here was the very thing he once entered the forest to obtain. Yet he did not want it. He wanted a particular deer. He lowered the spear. The young deer disappeared. The hunter sat in silence. His desire had changed its object. What began as hunting for survival had become hunting for victory. And victory was harder to satisfy. He returned home empty-handed. Meanwhile, the Bodhisattva continued living quietly. He had no idea how much space he now occupied in the hunter's thoughts. That was another difference between them. The hunter's mind was full of the deer. The deer's mind was not full of the hunter. The Bodhisattva remembered the danger. He adjusted his behavior. But he did not carry the hunter everywhere he went. He still noticed sunlight. Still tasted fresh grass. Still listened to rain. Still rested when tired. Awareness had changed his choices without colonizing his entire life. One evening, he spoke again with the younger deer. One of them asked, "Do you think about the hunter often?" "Sometimes." "Do you worry he may be near?" "When there are signs." And when there are no signs, then I think about what is actually here. The young deer looked around. What is actually here? The Bodhisattva smiled. Grass. The others laughed. And wind. A bird called above them. And that bird. The young deer became quiet. The Bodhisattva continued, danger deserves attention when it is present. But fear often asks us to keep danger alive even when it is absent. He lowered his head toward the grass. If I escape a hunter and then spend every peaceful hour imagining him, part of me is still standing beneath that fruit tree. The young deer listened carefully. Then forgetting is good? No. Remember enough to learn. He lifted his head. But do not remember in a way that keeps the trap inside you. This distinction was subtle. Memory could protect. Memory could also imprison. The same event could become wisdom or fear depending on how the mind held it. The Bodhisattva had remembered the hunter's method. He had not turned the whole forest into the hunter. The hunter, however, was doing the opposite. He had turned the whole forest into the deer. Every footprint might belong to it. Every broken branch might reveal it. Every clearing became a possible place of confrontation. He no longer simply walked through the woods. He searched. And searching changed what he saw. A mind obsessed with one object begins to reorganize reality around that object. The hunter thought this made him focused. In truth, it made him blind. Several more days passed. Then one afternoon, rain fell heavily across the forest. The hunter stayed home. He sat beneath the roof and listened to water striking the ground. Without a trail to follow and without a spear in his hand, his thoughts became harder to avoid. He remembered the young deer he could have killed. He remembered returning empty-handed. He remembered his relative's question. Are you hunting the deer or your own wounded pride? The hunter became irritated again. He stood. Then sat. He looked at the spear leaning against the wall. For a moment, he imagined not returning to the forest. The thought brought unexpected relief. Then another thought came immediately. If you stop now, the deer has won. The relief vanished. He picked up the spear. This was how pride kept him moving. Not by promising happiness. By threatening humiliation. The next morning, the rain had stopped. The forest was washed clean. Fresh tracks would be easy to see. The hunter left before sunrise. Far away, the Bodhisattva also woke. He stepped from beneath a tree and smelled the wet earth. The world felt new. He did not know that someone was already searching for him, but he did know something more important. Every morning presented the same task. To see clearly. To move carefully. and not to let yesterday's danger steal today's mind. The hunter entered the forest carrying the weight of unfinished anger. The deer entered it carrying attention. Both were alert. But only one was free. After the rain, the forest became unusually clear. Dust had vanished from the leaves. Every stone seemed darker. Every scent seemed stronger. Water gathered in the hollows of roots, and thin streams appeared where there had been only dry earth the day before. For the hunter, this was useful. Fresh tracks could be distinguished easily. He moved slowly through the wet forest, looking down more often than ahead. Near a patch of soft ground, he found what he wanted. Hoofprints. He crouched. They were fresh. His heart quickened. The prints led toward the eastern side of the forest. For several moments, the hunter wondered whether the deer might finally be returning to the old fruit tree. He followed. But the tracks turned away before reaching the clearing. The hunter frowned. The deer was still avoiding the place. He stood beneath dripping branches and thought. Then he understood something. The first trap had failed because he had tried to make the fruit too attractive. He had thrown it directly toward the deer. The unnatural movement had revealed him. If he ever had another chance, he would need to imitate nature more carefully. The hunter began studying fruit as though fruit itself were a language. How did ripe fruit fall when there was no wind? How far did it roll? Which branches dropped first? What sound did fruit make when it struck wet leaves? He watched. He practiced. And gradually, his imitation improved. Yet the strange irony remained. He was learning patience in order to serve impatience. He was learning observation in order to serve blindness. He was becoming more disciplined in the pursuit of an undisciplined desire. This is possible. A person can become extremely skillful at moving in the wrong direction. Weeks passed. The hunter stopped visiting the old tree every day. He wanted the forest to become quiet again. He wanted animals to forget his presence. Most of all, he hoped the Bodhisattva might eventually believe the danger had passed. And in one sense, his reasoning was correct. Time does soften vigilance. A place avoided for many days can begin to feel safe again. A danger not seen for many days can begin to feel imaginary. The mind grows tired of caution. It begins whispering, "Perhaps I worried too much. Perhaps the danger is gone. Perhaps this time will be different." The Bodhisattva understood this tendency. So he did not rely upon fear to keep him safe. Fear fades. He relied upon understanding. He knew why he had stopped visiting the tree. As long as the reason remained valid, he did not need to feel frightened every morning. This made his caution quiet and sustainable. He was not avoiding the clearing because his heart raced whenever he thought of it. He avoided it because the evidence had once shown that a hunter used the place. One afternoon, a young deer approached him. "Surely the hunter is gone by now." "Perhaps. We have not seen him for many days." "That is true. The fruit there must be falling everywhere." "Probably." The young deer looked toward the east. "Then why not go back?" The Bodhisattva asked, "What has changed?" The young deer thought. "Time has passed." "Yes. Isn't that a change?" "It is a change in time." The Bodhisattva looked at him. "But is it evidence that the hunter has abandoned the place?" The young deer hesitated. "No." "Then we know only that we have not seen him." "That is not the same as knowing he is gone." The young deer sighed. "You make everything sound difficult." The Bodhisattva laughed softly. "Reality is often more complicated than desire would prefer." The young deer lowered his head toward the grass. After a moment, he asked, "Do you never become tired of being careful?" "Of course." "Then what do you do?" "I remember what care protects." The young deer looked up. "My life." The answer was simple. The Bodhisattva continued, "Caution feels expensive when we count only the effort. It feels different when we remember the value of what the effort protects." Several mornings later, the Bodhisattva traveled alone toward a part of the forest he had not visited recently. The night had been windy. Many fruits had fallen. He found enough food without difficulty. As he ate, he noticed something that made him stop. A fruit lay several steps away. There was nothing unusual about it. Then another fruit dropped from a nearby tree. It struck a branch, bounced once, and rolled downhill. The Bodhisattva watched it. He suddenly remembered the hunter. Not with fear. With clarity. He remembered the fruits that had rolled toward him. The memory returned so vividly that he could almost see the old clearing again. He realized that the hunter's mistake had contained a lesson larger than the immediate danger. Natural things have patterns. Wind has patterns. Water has patterns. Animals have patterns. Human behavior has patterns. When something breaks the pattern, attention should awaken. This did not mean every unusual event was dangerous. But unusual events deserved observation. The Bodhisattva continued eating. Then he heard a faint sound in the distance. A branch. Not breaking. Shifting. He froze. His ears turned. Nothing followed. He waited. Still nothing. A younger version of himself might have dismissed it. Another deer might have fled immediately. The Bodhisattva did neither. He simply gathered information. The wind was moving from the west. The sound had come from the north. The leaves above him were moving west to east. The branch sound had moved downward. Something had touched it. He stepped slowly away from the fruit. Then a monkey emerged from the leaves. The Bodhisattva relaxed. No hunter. No trap. Only a monkey. He returned to eating. This small moment mattered. Wisdom had not made him suspicious of everything. He had investigated. He had received new information. Then he had released the concern. A fearful mind might have spent the rest of the day imagining hunters. A careless mind might never have looked. Wisdom occupied the narrow path between them. That same morning, the hunter sat again in the old fruit tree. He had returned before dawn. This time, he was almost completely hidden. He had wrapped parts of his clothing with leaves and bark. His spear rested along a thick branch where its shape could not easily be seen from below. He had also placed several ripe fruits beside him. But he would not throw them carelessly. If the deer appeared, he would wait. He would let one fruit fall naturally. Then another after a long interval. He smiled. This time, you will see nothing. Hours passed. The Bodhisattva did not come. But another animal did. A small antelope entered the clearing. It walked toward the tree. The hunter watched. He could have thrown the spear. Again, he did not. He was waiting for one particular animal. The antelope ate several fruits and left. Then birds came. Then monkeys. Still the hunter waited. By late afternoon, his muscles ached. He climbed down. The next day, he returned. Again, no Bodhisattva. The day after that, the same. His patience, which appeared impressive from the outside, was actually being fed by obsession. This distinction is important. Patience rooted in wisdom creates spaciousness. Patience rooted in craving creates tension. Both can wait. But they do not wait in the same way. The hunter's body remained still while his mind strained forward. Every sound became, "Is that him?" Every movement, "Now." Every shadow, "There." He was physically motionless and inwardly exhausted. One morning, after many failed waits, the hunter finally saw movement at the far edge of the clearing. A deer. His heartbeat changed. The animal stepped from behind the trees. Golden morning light touched its back. The hunter recognized it immediately. The Bodhisattva had returned. Not because he had forgotten. Not because he had become careless. His path had simply brought him near the old clearing again. And when he saw the familiar fruit tree in the distance, he stopped. The hunter watched from above. Neither moved. The old scene seemed to return. Tree. Fruit. Hunter. Deer. But time had changed both of them. The hunter had become better at hiding. The deer had become better at seeing. The Bodhisattva remained far from the tree. He looked at the ground. Several fruits lay beneath the branches. Nothing moved unnaturally. No spear could be seen. No human scent reached him clearly. For a moment, everything appeared safe. Then one fruit fell. It dropped naturally. Struck the ground. Rolled a short distance. The Bodhisattva watched. A long time passed. Then another fruit fell. Again, naturally. The hunter smiled inwardly. He had learned. But so had the deer. The Bodhisattva did not ask only, "Does the fruit look natural?" He asked, "Why am I here? What do I already know about this place? What would I risk merely to confirm that the danger is gone?" He looked at the abundant forest around him. There were other trees. Other fruits. Other paths. He did not need this one. And because he did not need it, the trap lost much of its power. The hunter waited for him to approach. The deer remained still. Minutes passed. Then the Bodhisattva quietly turned away. The hunter nearly shouted in frustration. He had hidden perfectly. He had imitated nature perfectly. Yet the deer still refused to enter. The hunter did not understand why. He thought a perfect trap should produce a perfect result. But he had overlooked the one thing no trap could fully control. The target could decide that the reward was not worth the risk. The Bodhisattva walked back into the forest. He had not discovered the hunter. He had not proven the tree was dangerous. He had simply chosen not to gamble his life for fruit he did not need. And sometimes, wisdom looks exactly like that. No dramatic revelation. No heroic battle. No victory anyone else can see. Only a quiet decision: I do not have to find out. Behind him, hidden in the branches, the hunter tightened his fist. The deer disappeared. And once again, the fruit remained beneath the tree. Sweet. Golden. Untouched. The hunter did not give up. If anything, the deer's refusal made his obsession stronger. He had prepared carefully. He had hidden well. He had even learned to let the fruit fall naturally. Yet the deer had simply turned away. This disturbed him more than an obvious escape. Had the deer seen him? Or had it merely chosen caution? The hunter could not know. And because he could not know, his mind became restless. He began to imagine the deer's thoughts. Perhaps it is mocking me. Perhaps it knows I am here and wants me to suffer. Perhaps it believes itself wiser than any man. These thoughts were inventions. But the hunter reacted to them as though they were facts. This is another way the mind becomes trapped. It creates a story. Then it becomes angry at the story it created. The hunter descended from the tree. He stood beside the fallen fruit. Nothing about the clearing had changed. Yet to him, it no longer seemed like a hunting place. It had become a place of humiliation. He kicked one of the fruits aside. I will not wait forever. He carried the spear back into the forest. This time, he abandoned subtlety. He had decided that if the deer would not approach the trap, he would strike the moment he saw it. For several days, he searched. The Bodhisattva continued his life calmly. He did not know the hunter had changed his method. But he did not need to know every plan. He needed only to remain attentive. One morning, the forest was unusually still. Mist rested low among the trunks. The Bodhisattva walked toward a grove where fruit often fell after the night wind. He moved slowly. His ears turned toward every sound. A bird called once. Then stopped. The deer paused. Silence followed. Not absolute silence. Leaves still moved. Insects still whispered. But something in the pattern had changed. The bird that normally called repeatedly had become quiet. The Bodhisattva lifted his head. He did not know why. That was enough. He stepped behind a thick tree trunk and waited. A few moments later, he heard a faint scraping sound. Wood against bark. Then nothing. The hunter was nearby. He had climbed partway onto a low branch to gain a clearer line of sight. The Bodhisattva could not yet see him. But the forest had already spoken. The deer moved away from the grove. The hunter caught a glimpse of movement between the trees. He raised the spear. Too late. The deer vanished behind another trunk. The hunter hurried forward. Now both knew the other was near. The chase had finally begun. But it was not wild. The Bodhisattva did not run in panic. He moved with purpose. He chose dense ground where the hunter's spear would be harder to throw. He passed between trees rather than across open space. He listened constantly. The hunter followed as quickly as he could. Branches struck his arms. Roots caught his feet. His breathing grew heavy. The deer remained ahead. Every few moments, the hunter saw a flash of movement. A back. An ear. A tail disappearing behind leaves. Each glimpse renewed his frustration. "Stop!" the hunter shouted. The word was absurd. Why would prey obey? Yet anger often expects the world to cooperate with it. The Bodhisattva kept moving. Soon he reached a wider clearing. For the hunter, this was the opportunity he had wanted. The deer had less cover. The hunter stepped from behind the trees and drew back his arm. The Bodhisattva saw him clearly. For the first time since the old fruit tree, hunter and deer faced each other without disguise. The spear rose. The deer stood still for only a heartbeat. In that heartbeat, he observed everything. The hunter's feet. The position of his shoulder. The direction of his gaze. The angle of the spear. He did not stare at the weapon alone. He watched the body that would release it. Then the hunter threw. The spear crossed the clearing with terrifying speed. But the Bodhisattva had already moved. He sprang sharply to one side. The spear passed where his chest had been and struck the earth behind him. The hunter stared. The deer landed safely. For a moment, neither moved. Then the Bodhisattva turned toward him. "You have tried again." The hunter breathed heavily. His face was red with effort and anger. The deer continued, and again, the result is the same. The hunter reached for another weapon at his belt, but the deer remained beyond reach. "You think yourself clever," the hunter said. The Bodhisattva answered, "No." The reply surprised him. "Then why speak to me as though you have defeated me?" "I have defeated nothing." The deer looked at the spear buried in the ground. "I simply did not allow your intention to become my death." The hunter's jaw tightened. "That is the same thing." "No." The Bodhisattva's voice remained calm. "Victory over another is one thing. Freedom from another's harmful intention is another." The hunter did not understand. He wanted one of two roles. Winner. Loser. The deer refused both. The Bodhisattva continued, "You are angry because you believe my escape has taken something from you." The hunter said nothing. "But I never owed you my life." The word struck harder than accusation. The deer took one step backward. "You could leave this forest today and never think of me again." The hunter laughed bitterly. "You think it is that simple?" "Yes." The answer came without hesitation. "That is exactly why it is difficult." The hunter stared. The Bodhisattva continued, you have repeated the same action so many times that stopping now feels like defeat. But stopping harm is not defeat. Sometimes it is the first victory a person has over himself. The hunter's expression changed. For one brief moment, something quieter appeared beneath the anger. But then pride returned. "You speak like a teacher," the deer replied, "then listen like a student." The hunter's hand tightened. He wanted to recover the spear. He wanted to throw again. But the deer was alert. The chance had passed. The Bodhisattva turned toward the forest. "Before leaving," he said, "you did not kill me today." The hunter remained silent. "But remember this carefully." The deer's voice grew solemn. "An action does not end when the weapon misses." The hunter looked toward him. "Intent leaves a mark on the one who carries it." The Bodhisattva continued, "Cruelty practiced again and again becomes a road. If you continue walking that road, one day you will arrive at its destination." The hunter frowned. "What destination?" "Suffering." The forest wind moved across the clearing. The Bodhisattva's voice remained gentle, but no longer soft. "You may escape punishment from men. You may succeed in killing many creatures. You may even believe that nothing has happened to you. But deeds ripen according to their causes. A mind trained in cruelty becomes its own punishment long before any future world appears." The hunter looked away. The deer added, "And if such evil continues without restraint, the suffering that follows will be far greater than what you imagine now." The old teaching spoke of hell realms, places of unbearable pain created by the ripening of destructive karma. The Bodhisattva did not speak these words to frighten the hunter for pleasure. He spoke them as a warning. A warning is not hatred. A warning can be compassion offered to someone still walking toward danger. The hunter looked back. "You threaten me?" "No. I am telling you that fire burns whether or not the person touching it believes me." The Bodhisattva stepped toward the trees. "You are still free to remove your hand." Then he ran. In moments, he disappeared into the dense forest. The hunter remained in the clearing. His spear stood buried in the earth. He walked toward it slowly. He pulled it free. For the first time, the weapon felt unusually heavy. The deer's words remained in his mind. Stopping harm is not defeat. He hated the sentence. Perhaps because part of him understood it. The hunter looked toward the place where the deer had vanished. He could still chase. The tracks were fresh. The forest was open ahead. He took one step. Then stopped. For a long time, he stood there. The story of that moment does not say that he became a saint. It does not say that all cruelty vanished from his heart. Change is rarely so simple. But a crack had appeared in his certainty. Before, he had believed only one thing: I must kill the deer. Now another possibility had entered: I could stop. Sometimes that is where change begins. Not with purity. Not with wisdom fully formed. But with the discovery that another choice exists. Far away, the Bodhisattva slowed his pace. He had escaped again. He did not celebrate. He did not imagine the hunter humiliated. He simply felt the ground beneath his feet and listened to the forest returning to its ordinary sounds. The bird called again. Once. Then twice. The pattern had returned. The deer lowered his head and continued walking. He had protected his life without hatred. He had warned the man who wished to kill him without surrendering to contempt. And in doing so, he revealed a deeper form of intelligence. To see a trap is wisdom. To escape a weapon is skill. But to protect the mind from becoming like the mind that attacks you, that is a rarer kind of freedom. The days after the encounter were quieter. The hunter still entered the forest, but something in him had changed. He had not abandoned hunting. He had not suddenly become gentle. But the words of the deer followed him. Stopping harm is not defeat. He disliked the sentence because it returned at inconvenient moments. When he raised his spear, it returned. When he saw a frightened animal, it returned. When he sharpened a blade at night, it returned. A thought once heard cannot always be made unheard. This is why truth sometimes works slowly. It does not always conquer the mind immediately. Sometimes it simply refuses to leave. The hunter tried to silence it. He told himself that animals existed to be hunted. He told himself that strength gave permission. He told himself that the deer had escaped only by luck. Yet beneath these explanations, another question had begun to grow: what if the deer was right? This question irritated him more than the deer itself. Because once a person begins to question the road he is walking, every step becomes heavier. Meanwhile, the Bodhisattva continued living among the trees. The younger deer still came to him with questions. One evening, after sunset had turned the sky deep blue, they gathered near a quiet pool. The surface reflected the first stars. A young deer asked, "Is every danger a trap?" "No." "Then what is a trap?" The Bodhisattva thought for a moment. A trap is something that uses your own movement against you. The young deer looked puzzled. The Bodhisattva continued, "A falling rock is dangerous, but it does not need your desire. A tiger may attack you directly, but a trap often waits for you to cooperate. Like the fruit? Yes. The hunter could not force me to approach the tree, so he tried to make me want to approach. The young deer nodded. Then traps depend on desire. Often. The Bodhisattva looked at the water. But not only desire. They can also use fear. How? If you panic, you may rush exactly where danger wants you to go. They can use pride. How? If someone insults you, you may enter a fight simply to prove you are not weak. They can use anger. If someone provokes you, you may act before you understand the situation. The young deer became thoughtful. So many things can become bait. Yes. The Bodhisattva's voice softened. That is why the most important thing is not only to see the trap outside. It is to know what inside you can be pulled. The deer listened in silence. This was harder than watching trees. Harder than noticing footprints. Because the forest outside could be observed with eyes and ears. The forest inside required another kind of attention. One deer asked, "How do we know what can pull us?" "Notice what makes you hurry." The Bodhisattva replied. "Notice what makes you unable to pause. Notice what makes one small thing suddenly feel like the only thing that matters." The young deer remembered the hunter's fruit. The Bodhisattva continued, "When the mind says, 'I must act now,' that is a good moment to look again. Not because action is always wrong, but because urgency can hide what calmness would reveal." Another deer asked, "Did you know all of this before meeting the hunter?" "No." The answer surprised them. "You learned from him?" "Yes." The Bodhisattva smiled gently. Even an enemy can become a teacher if you refuse to learn only hatred from him. The young deer were silent. This idea seemed strange. How could someone who wanted to kill you become a teacher? The Bodhisattva explained, "The hunter taught me how easily familiarity can hide danger. He taught me how desire can narrow attention. He taught me that anger can make a person repeat the same harmful action long after the original reason is gone. And he taught me something else." "What?" "That seeing another being trapped by his own mind is sadder than merely seeing him fail." The youngest deer tilted his head. "You feel sorry for him?" "Yes." "But he wants to kill you." "That is why I keep my distance." The others waited. Compassion does not mean standing within reach of a spear. The Bodhisattva continued. You can understand another creature's suffering without offering your body to his confusion. This distinction mattered deeply. Many beings confuse compassion with surrender. They think that refusing hatred means refusing boundaries. But the Bodhisattva did not return to the hunter's tree. He did not walk closer to the spear. He did not say, "Because I understand your pain, you may harm me." He protected himself clearly. And he kept his heart clear at the same time. That balance was the lesson. The following morning, the Bodhisattva traveled alone. He came across a narrow gorge where rainwater had cut through the earth. A fallen tree formed a natural bridge. He stopped before crossing. The wood looked strong. The gorge below was not extremely deep, but a fall could still injure him. He tested the trunk with one hoof. It moved slightly. He stepped back. A younger animal might have crossed quickly. The bridge looked almost safe. But almost mattered. The Bodhisattva walked along the gorge and found another path. It took longer. But it was stable. As he climbed the opposite side, he reflected on how often beings confuse efficiency with wisdom. The fastest path is not always the best path. The easiest reward is not always the safest reward. The shortest answer is not always the truest answer. Sometimes the extra distance is the price of remaining whole. Later that day, the hunter arrived at the same gorge. He saw the fallen tree. He tested it only briefly. His mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about the deer. He stepped onto the trunk. Halfway across, the wood shifted. The hunter lost his balance. He jumped back just before the trunk rolled into the gorge. His heart pounded. For several breaths, he stood frozen. Then he looked at the fallen bridge. Something disturbed him. The deer would have noticed. He knew it. The thought came immediately. Not because the deer was magical. Not because it could foresee the future. But because it paid attention before moving. The hunter looked at his own feet. He had nearly fallen because his body was in one place and his mind in another. Again, the deer's words returned. The mind can become its own trap. The hunter sat beside the gorge. For once, he did not curse the deer. He did not curse the tree. He simply sat. The forest moved around him. A bird drank from a puddle. Leaves shifted. Somewhere far away, water fell over stone. He listened. At first, listening felt empty. Then he realized how much he normally missed. He was always searching for something. Tracks prey. Movement. Opportunity. He rarely heard the forest when it was not useful to him. Now, for a few minutes, the forest existed without being a hunting ground. It was simply alive. This realization was small. But it softened something. The hunter looked at his spear. He remembered the deer standing across the clearing. "I never owed you my life." At the time, the sentence had angered him. Now he heard it differently. The deer had spoken a truth so obvious that the hunter had never considered it. The animal's life belonged to the animal. The forest was not a storehouse arranged for his appetite. Every creature moved through the world with its own fear, hunger, memory, and desire to live. The hunter was not yet ready to abandon everything he had always done, but for the first time, he felt the weight of what he had treated as ordinary. He stood. Instead of crossing the gorge, he chose the longer path around. The same path the deer had chosen earlier. He did not know this. But the forest did not need him to know. Learning does not require applause. Far away, the Bodhisattva rested beneath a tree. The sun had begun to lower. A warm breeze moved through the leaves. He did not know that the hunter had nearly fallen. He did not know that the man had sat quietly beside the gorge. He did not know that one sentence had begun to work inside another mind. But this too was part of wisdom: you do not control what happens after you speak truth. You only control whether you speak it without hatred. The rest belongs to causes, conditions, time, and the other person's willingness to see. That evening, the hunter returned home later than usual. His family expected meat. He brought none. Did the deer escape again? Someone asked. The hunter placed the spear against the wall. I did not see him. Then why were you gone so long? The hunter looked toward the doorway. I took the longer road. No one understood why the answer mattered, but to him, it did. Because for the first time in many days, he had chosen a longer path, not because he failed to catch something, but because he had finally decided that reaching the other side safely mattered more than reaching it quickly. And sometimes the path out of cruelty begins exactly like that. Not with a great vow. Not with a perfect transformation. Just with one unnecessary harm avoided. One impulse questioned. One longer road chosen. One moment in which a person notices, there is another way. Several more days passed before the hunter saw the Bodhisattva again. By then, the forest had entered a warmer season. The air was dry. The streams ran lower. Many fruit trees had begun dropping their last ripe fruit before the heat deepened. The Bodhisattva knew that food would soon become harder to find. This made caution more difficult. When resources are abundant, it is easy to walk away from one dangerous place. When food becomes scarce, the same fruit tree can begin to look much more important. The Bodhisattva understood this clearly. He also understood that scarcity changes the mind. A hungry creature takes risks that a full creature would refuse. A thirsty creature may approach a dangerous riverbank. A frightened creature may trust a false promise. Need does not make danger disappear. It only makes danger easier to ignore. One morning, after finding little food, the Bodhisattva came again near the old eastern clearing. He stopped far away. The tree still bore fruit. Not much, but enough. Several ripe pieces lay beneath the branches. The deer felt hunger in his body. This time, turning away was not as easy. He stood still. Then he remembered, the stronger the desire, the more carefully I should look. So he did not move closer. Instead, he observed the trunk, the branches, the ground, the pattern of fallen fruit, the nearby bushes, the direction of the wind. Everything seemed normal. He waited. Nothing moved. A long time passed. His hunger became louder. Still he waited. The hunter was already in the tree. He had returned before dawn and hidden more carefully than ever. This time, he had changed one thing. He did not intend to wait until the deer stood directly beneath him. The moment it came within range, he would throw the spear. He had learned from his earlier failure. He had also become impatient again. He watched the Bodhisattva standing at the edge of the clearing. "Come closer." The deer did not. The hunter waited. The Bodhisattva looked at the fruit, then at the tree. He could not see the man, but he felt the old uncertainty. This was enough to keep him still. The hunter's hand tightened around the spear. Minutes passed. Then, slowly, he reached for a fruit. He threw it carefully. Not directly toward the deer. That had betrayed him before. Instead, he tossed it so that it struck a branch first. The fruit dropped, bounced, and rolled naturally toward the edge of the clearing. The Bodhisattva watched. Another fruit followed after a long pause. Then another. Each one seemed plausible. The hunter had learned to imitate nature well. But something still felt wrong. The deer thought, the tree is giving fruit too conveniently. He looked upward. At first, he saw nothing. Then sunlight shifted. A tiny glint appeared between leaves. Metal. Only for an instant. That was enough. The deer understood. The hunter was there again. This time, the Bodhisattva did not run immediately. He knew that sudden movement might trigger the throw. He also knew the hunter believed himself hidden. So the deer remained calm. Then he looked toward the tree and spoke as if addressing it. "My old friend," he said, "you have become very generous again." The hunter froze. The Bodhisattva continued, "When I was younger, your fruit used to fall downward. A soft wind moved through the leaves. But now it seems to travel with remarkable intelligence. The hunter's jaw tightened. The deer looked at the fruit near his feet. Some roll toward me. Some arrive just when I am hungry. What an extraordinary tree! The hunter realized he had been discovered. Anger rose immediately. Again. Always the same anger. Not because the deer had attacked him. Because the deer had seen through him. The Bodhisattva continued, I think I understand. You are no longer a tree for deer. You have become a tree that feeds hunters. The hunter stood suddenly. Leaves shook. The illusion ended. Now the Bodhisattva saw him clearly. The long spear was already in his hand. The hunter shouted, You arrogant animal! The deer took one careful step backward. You speak as though you were a man. The Bodhisattva answered, and you act as though wisdom belongs only to men. The hunter's face hardened. He lifted the spear. The Bodhisattva did not insult him. He did not taunt him. He simply said, Before you throw, think. The hunter hesitated. Only for a moment. The deer continued, You have tried before. You have waited in trees. You have followed tracks. You have chased me through the forest. You have nearly harmed yourself. And still, here you are. The hunter said, This time will be different. The Bodhisattva looked at the spear. Perhaps. Then he looked directly toward the hunter. But if the spear misses again, what will you do? The hunter said nothing. Build another trap. Silence. Follow another trail. Still nothing. Spend another week thinking of me. The hunter's grip tightened. The deer continued, At what point will you admit that the trap is no longer beneath my feet? The hunter stared. It is inside your mind. The word struck deeply. For a moment, the hunter did not move. Then anger returned more fiercely. He threw the spear. The Bodhisattva had expected it. The moment the hunter's shoulder turned, the deer sprang sideways. The spear struck the ground. Again. The hunter shouted in rage. The Bodhisattva stood beyond reach. Then his expression changed. He was no longer merely cautious. He was solemn. Listen carefully. The hunter reached for another weapon but stopped. The deer spoke, You have failed to kill me once more. But that is not the most important failure. The hunter glared at him. You have failed to stop yourself. The forest was still. The Bodhisattva continued, A weapon that misses can be picked up again. A trap that fails can be rebuilt. But every time you choose cruelty, you strengthen the part of yourself that will choose cruelty again. The hunter looked away. The deer did not soften the truth. You think karma is a punishment waiting somewhere far away. It is already happening. The hunter looked back. Every act shapes the one who acts. Every intention leaves a path. Every repeated choice makes the next choice easier. The Bodhisattva stepped backward. If you continue to delight in killing, harming, deceiving, and frightening living beings, the suffering born from those actions will not disappear. He paused. The teachings speak of hell not because wise beings enjoy frightening others. They speak of hell because actions have consequences. The hunter's breathing slowed. The deer continued, if a man plants bitter seed and waters it every day, he should not be surprised when bitter fruit appears. You are planting now. The hunter stared at the spear buried in the earth. The Bodhisattva's voice became gentler. I do not say this because I hate you. The hunter looked up sharply. Then why say it? Because someone should warn a man walking toward fire. The hunter almost laughed. You think you are saving me? No. The deer shook his head. I cannot save you from choices you insist on making. I can only tell you where the road leads. The hunter said nothing. The Bodhisattva continued, you can still turn. The words were simple. No threat. No insult. No triumph. Just a possibility. The hunter looked at the spear. Then at the deer. For the first time, shame appeared more strongly than anger. He remembered the fruit tree. The first failed ambush. The chase. The gorge. The long days of waiting. The meals missed. The animals ignored. The energy spent. The thoughts that had revolved around one deer for weeks. The Bodhisattva was right. The trap was no longer beneath the tree. It had moved inside him. The hunter lowered his eyes. But the Bodhisattva did not approach. Compassion did not erase caution. The deer knew that a person can feel shame and still become dangerous. So he kept his distance. I will leave now, he said. The hunter did not answer. The deer turned. Before disappearing into the forest, he said one final thing. You could spend the rest of your life trying to prove that you are stronger than another creature. Or you could discover whether you are strong enough to stop. Then he vanished between the trees. The hunter remained alone. The fruit tree stood above him. Several fruits lay on the ground. His spear rested in the earth. He slowly climbed down. For the first time, he did not immediately pull the spear free. He sat beside it. The sun rose higher. Birds returned to the branches. One landed almost directly above him. The hunter looked up. He could have thrown a stone. He did not. The bird remained. A few minutes later, another animal crossed the far side of the clearing. The hunter watched. He did not move. This was not yet transformation. It was interruption. But interruption matters. A habit cannot change until, at least once, it fails to complete itself. That morning, cruelty reached for its usual ending. And did not quite get there. Far away, the Bodhisattva walked deeper into the forest. His body was still hungry. He had left the fruit behind, but his mind was light. He had escaped another spear. More importantly, he had once again refused to turn survival into hatred. The forest opened before him. Somewhere ahead, there would be other food. Other trees. Other mornings. And perhaps, somewhere behind him, another life had finally begun to see the first opening in its own trap. That evening, the hunter returned home without the spear in his hand. He carried it over his shoulder, but for the first time it did not feel like an extension of his will. It felt like an object. A piece of wood. A point of metal. Something he could carry. Or put down. The difference seemed small. But to the hunter, it was not. For many weeks, he had believed the spear expressed his strength. Now he began to wonder whether the need to use it had actually revealed his weakness. He entered his house. No one asked about the deer. Perhaps his family had learned that the subject only irritated him. The hunter placed the spear against the wall. Then he sat. Outside, evening sounds began. Cooking fires crackled. Children called to one another. A dog barked in the distance. The hunter stared at his hands. He remembered the deer's words, "You could spend the rest of your life trying to prove that you are stronger than another creature. Or you could discover whether you are strong enough to stop." The sentence felt unbearable because it reversed everything he had believed. He had always thought strength meant the ability to take. To overpower. To strike. To win. But what if strength also meant restraint? What if the man who could kill but chose not to was stronger than the man who killed simply because he could? The hunter did not like where the thought led. It forced him to look backward. Not only at the deer. At years. At animals wounded. At frightened eyes. At cries he had ignored. At the casual way he had treated another creature's life as though it had no meaning beyond his own appetite. For a long time, he had never questioned this. Habit had protected him from seeing. Then came the deer. A creature he had expected to be simple prey. Instead, the deer had reflected his own mind back to him. And now the hunter understood why he had hated it so much. It had become a mirror. A mirror does not create the face. It only makes it harder to pretend the face is not there. The hunter slept poorly. In his dreams, fruit fell from trees. Spears flew. But they never struck the deer. Instead, each spear curved through the air and returned toward him. He woke before dawn. His heart was racing. For several minutes, he remained still. Then he rose and walked toward the spear. His hand stopped before touching it. He stood there. This was a tiny moment. No one witnessed it. No teacher stood nearby. No deer watched from the forest. The choice existed only between the hunter and his own habit. Finally, he lowered his hand. He went outside without the spear. The morning air felt strange. He had entered the forest unarmed many times as a child. But not for years. Without the weapon, he felt exposed. Then he realized that most animals in the forest lived every day this way. Exposed. Vulnerable. Dependent upon attention, speed, hiding, luck. He walked toward the trees. Not to hunt. Not yet to seek forgiveness. He simply wanted to walk. At the edge of the forest, he stopped. Birdsong came from several directions. A small animal moved in dry leaves. His body reacted automatically. He turned. For a heartbeat, his hand reached toward the place where the spear should have been. There was nothing there. The hunter almost laughed. The habit was still alive. He continued walking. Soon he reached the old eastern clearing. The fruit tree stood exactly as before. The hidden platform remained high in the branches. Several ropes had loosened. Dry leaves covered the ground. The hunter looked upward. He remembered climbing before dawn with certainty in his heart. He remembered waiting. Throwing fruit. Throwing the spear. He walked to the place where the weapon had once struck the earth. Rain had erased the mark. This surprised him. The ground did not remember the way he did. The forest had already moved on. He sat beneath the tree. For the first time, he ate one of its fruits himself. It was sweet. He thought of how many hours he had used the same fruit as bait. How strange. Something capable of nourishing could also be used to deceive. The fruit had not changed. The intention had. The hunter understood then that many things in life were like this. Speech could comfort or manipulate. Skill could protect or harm. Patience could become wisdom or obsession. Even intelligence could serve compassion or cruelty. The instrument did not decide. The intention shaped its meaning. He looked at his empty hands. For the first time, he began to understand karma not as a distant punishment, but as the shaping power of repeated intention. Every act trained something. Every act made one future easier and another harder. A cruel act trained cruelty. A patient act trained patience. A restrained act trained restraint. The hunter had spent years training one kind of mind. Could another kind still be trained? He did not know. But the question itself gave him hope. Later that morning, he heard movement at the edge of the clearing. The hunter froze. A deer appeared. Not the Bodhisattva. A young one. It stopped the moment it saw him. Its body tightened. The hunter recognized the look immediately. Fear. The young deer prepared to flee. For years, that reaction had excited him. Now it hurt. The hunter slowly lowered his eyes. He did not move toward the animal. He did not raise his hands. He simply remained still. The deer waited. Then, cautiously, it stepped backward and disappeared into the trees. The hunter let out a long breath. Nothing had happened. No one would praise him. No one even knew. Yet he understood something important. For the first time, an animal had been afraid of him, and he had not used that fear. This mattered. He stood and left the clearing. Far away, the Bodhisattva was moving with a small group of deer toward a new feeding ground. One of the younger deer asked, "Do you think the hunter will come again?" The Bodhisattva answered, "I do not know." "Do you hope he changes?" "Yes." "Do you trust that he has?" "No." The young deer looked surprised. "Can you hope without trusting?" "Of course." The Bodhisattva continued walking. Hope concerns what another being may become. Trust concerns what their actions have shown. The young deer thought about this. So compassion does not require pretending someone has changed before they have? No. That would not be compassion. What would it be? Confusion. The Bodhisattva looked toward the trees. If a snake has bitten you many times, you do not prove your kindness by placing your hand near its mouth again. You may still wish that the snake causes no more harm. You may still refuse hatred. But wisdom remembers patterns. The young deer nodded. This lesson was subtle but essential. Forgiveness was not forgetfulness. Compassion was not naivety. A clear heart did not require closed eyes. That afternoon, the hunter walked to the river. He washed his face. Then he looked at his reflection. For years, he had searched the forest for the deer. Now, for the first time, he looked at himself without immediately defending what he saw. He noticed lines around his eyes. Fatigue. Hardness in his expression. He remembered the obsession that had consumed him. He remembered how the deer had remained free simply by refusing to participate. The hunter whispered, "The trap was mine." The river carried the words away. He returned home before sunset. The spear was still against the wall. He looked at it. Then he moved it into a corner. Not destroyed. Not ceremonially broken. Simply moved. A little farther from the hand. A little farther from habit. The next day, he worked near his home. The day after that, he entered the forest only to gather wood. He still noticed tracks. But he did not follow them. When animals moved nearby, he let them move. The old impulses did not disappear. Sometimes they returned sharply. Sometimes he imagined the satisfaction of proving himself stronger. But now another voice existed. Not the deer's voice anymore. His own. Stop. This is how teachings become real. At first, wisdom sounds like someone else's words. Later, if practiced, it begins to sound like your own mind. One evening, the hunter sat outside his home. The sky was deep gold near the horizon. He thought about the deer somewhere beyond the trees. He did not know whether he would ever see it again. Strangely, he no longer needed to. For weeks, he had believed the story could end only one way: he would kill the deer. Then he would win. Now he understood that the story had another possible ending. The deer could live. And he could stop hunting it. Nothing needed to be conquered. No blood needed to prove anything. The absence of violence could itself be the conclusion. This realization was quiet. Almost disappointing compared with the dramatic victory he once imagined. Yet it brought something victory had never brought him. Relief. The hunter looked toward the forest. Somewhere inside, the Bodhisattva was alive. That fact no longer felt like an insult. It felt right. Many years later, the story of the wise deer was still remembered in the forest. Young animals heard how he had approached the fruit tree without rushing forward. They heard how the hunter had hidden above the branches. They heard how fruit had been thrown down as bait. And they remembered the moment when the deer looked carefully, understood the deception, and refused to step into danger. But the deepest lesson was not simply that the deer had escaped. Many animals escape danger. Some are faster. Some are stronger. Some are simply fortunate. What made the Bodhisattva different was the quality of mind that came before the escape. He paused. He observed. He questioned what seemed attractive. He noticed what did not fit. And when danger became clear, he moved without hesitation. This was wisdom joined with action. Not suspicion of everything. Not fear of everything. Not passivity. Clear seeing. Clear choice. Clear movement. One evening, several young deer gathered beneath an old tree and asked the Bodhisattva to repeat the lesson. He looked at them quietly. "Do you remember the fruit?" "Yes." "Was the fruit itself dangerous?" "No." "Was the tree evil?" "No." "Then where was the danger?" "In the hunter's intention." The Bodhisattva nodded. "And what allowed that intention to become a trap?" The younger deer thought. "Our desire to approach." "Yes." He continued, "A trap often requires two things. One who wants to deceive. And one who stops looking carefully because he wants something too quickly." The young deer listened. So when you see something you desire, do not immediately ask only, "Can I have it?" Ask also, "What is happening around it?" Ask, "Why is this appearing now?" Ask, "What do I already know?" Ask, "What will it cost if I am wrong?" The forest was quiet. The Bodhisattva looked toward the darkening trees. This does not mean you should live frightened. Fear cannot guide a whole life. But awareness can. One of the deer asked, "And what about the hunter?" The Bodhisattva was silent for a moment. "What about him? Should we hate him?" "No." "Why?" "Because hatred is another trap." The young deer looked confused. The Bodhisattva explained, "If someone harms you, protect yourself. If someone deceives you, remember the pattern. If someone remains dangerous, keep your distance. But if you allow hatred to occupy your mind every day, the person who failed to capture your body may still capture your attention." The young deer lowered their heads thoughtfully. The Bodhisattva continued, "Wisdom protects the body from obvious danger. Compassion protects the heart from becoming another kind of danger." That was the balance. To see clearly without becoming cruel. To leave without needing revenge. To remember without becoming imprisoned by memory. To warn someone without hating them. The Bodhisattva had done all of these. When the hunter hurled the spear, the deer did not remain still and call that compassion. He moved. When the hunter's plan became clear, the deer did not pretend there was no danger. He left. When he spoke of karma and future suffering, he did not speak from pleasure in the hunter's downfall. He spoke because harmful actions have consequences. This is why the warning about suffering was not a curse. It was a teaching. The deer had said, in essence, "You may fail to kill me today, but if you continue training your mind in cruelty, the consequences will follow you." No being escapes the shaping power of repeated action. Every choice leaves a direction. Every intention strengthens a path. Every repeated act becomes easier to repeat. This is karma, not merely as punishment, but as formation. What we repeatedly do, we become more capable of doing. What we repeatedly feed, grows. What we repeatedly excuse, becomes easier to excuse again. The hunter had learned this slowly. And the deer had seen it clearly. The night grew deeper. One young deer asked, "Then was the hunter your enemy?" The Bodhisattva answered, "He was dangerous." "That was not my question." The Bodhisattva smiled. "No. I did not need to make him into an enemy inside my heart in order to recognize danger outside." The deer sat silently. This answer was difficult. But it contained the entire story. A being may wish to harm you. You may need to avoid him. You may need to warn others. You may need to act quickly. Yet even then, you do not have to surrender the mind to hatred. The Bodhisattva looked up at the stars. "One day," he said, "you may meet a danger that does not look like danger. It may look like opportunity. Like praise. Like profit. Like pleasure. Like the chance to prove yourself right. When that happens, remember the fruit tree." The younger deer looked toward him. "Remember that not everything moving toward you is a gift. Remember that urgency is not always truth. And remember that the ability to pause may save you from a trap you cannot yet see." Many ages passed. The forest disappeared. Kingdoms rose and fell. The bodies of the deer and hunter were gone. But causes do not vanish merely because time passes. Much later, the Blessed One sat among his monks. The subject of Devdatta arose. The monks knew that Devdatta had repeatedly tried to harm the Buddha. Again and again, jealousy had turned into schemes. Again and again, those schemes had failed. Some monks were disturbed. Others were angry. Why would one person continue attempting harm even after so many failures? The Buddha listened. Then he said, "Monks, this is not the first time Devdatta has tried to harm me." The assembly became quiet. In a former life, he also hid and waited for an opportunity. He prepared a trap. He tried to deceive. And when deception failed, he resorted to direct violence. The monks listened closely. The Buddha then revealed, the hunter who hid in the fruit tree was Devdatta. And the wise deer who saw through the trap and escaped the spear was I. The monks understood. The ancient story was not merely about an animal avoiding a hunter. It was about a pattern carried across lives. Jealousy. Harmful intention. Deception. Failure. And the refusal of the Bodhisattva to answer hatred with hatred. The Buddha continued, "One who acts with an unwholesome mind creates causes for suffering. Even if the harmful act fails outwardly, the intention has already shaped the mind inwardly. This was the deeper warning. The spear may miss. The trap may fail. The intended victim may escape. But the person who chooses cruelty has still strengthened cruelty within himself. No harmful intention is entirely without result. The Buddha did not teach this so that the monks would delight in Devadatta's future suffering. He taught it so that they would understand the seriousness of intention. Karma was not a weapon to throw at enemies. It was a mirror. Look at what you repeatedly choose. Look at what your anger is training you to become. Look at what your greed is teaching your mind to desire. Look at what fear is making easier to repeat. The monks sat in silence. Then the Buddha said, "Therefore, be attentive. When something appears desirable, do not abandon discernment. When danger appears, do not abandon wisdom. And when another person acts with hatred, do not let his hatred teach your own heart how to hate." The night deepened around the monastery. The teaching ended quietly. There was no battle. No punishment. No dramatic triumph. Only the memory of a deer standing at the edge of a clearing. Fruit before him. A hunter above. A spear waiting. And one moment of awareness between desire and action. That moment was enough. The deer saw. The trap failed. And the forest opened before him once again.